right, awesome. So this is going to be the first episode of the Iron City Sludge podcast. Today I am joined by none other than Brian Burks, Mr. Art by Burks. Thank you for joining me, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so I guess we've known each other now, what, like a year and a half or so, roughly, and doing the shows and things like that.
I'm bad with time. I know I met Gloria at least 4 years ago. So
Yeah, so I think so Gloria, for those who don't know, Gloria is my wife, Gloria Aiken Art. She does all my art. I'll give a shout out real quick. This is her art right here.
yeah, the first time I met her, she was sitting there doing art for your one of your projects at Woody's.
Oh,
And I
there
walked
you
up, I
go.
was like, "What is that? That's so cool!" And she was like telling me it was for your project.
Yeah, man, she's awesome, and I'm very thankful for her to. I don't know how you guys linked up, but to get into these shows and stuff has been so cool, and obviously it's grown over the years and really grown into a big community, which obviously is something I want to talk about today. So, but let's get into you. We're here to talk about you and what you got going on, which I know is a lot. I know I saw your calendar the other day. I know it's pretty packed most of the time. So, first thing I want to dig into, man, I just want to go back kind of early life and I know you mentioned that you kind of moved around as a kid. So, where are you from originally? How long have you been in Birmingham?
I was born in Anaheim, and I moved to Tucson with my mom when I was probably 2 or 3, and lived in Tucson till I was about 13. And I moved all over Tucson, just all over.
Yeah.
I took Hannah back there last year, and we just drove all over, and I showed her all the places I used to live. They're all like abandoned now.
Yeah. You
But
left and everybody was like, we're done. We're out of here
thank you.
because you were gone.
But yeah, I moved then to like a little town called Oracle, and then just kept getting closer till I got to this little place called Globe, Miami, that's between Phoenix and Tucson. It's kind of in the mountains. It's I lived there for a few years, and then moved to Alabama for a few years, then moved back there for a few years, and then moved back to Alabama permanently about probably about 20 years ago. So
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. So came to Alabama from Arizona. What kind of got you here? Was there something that brought you here specifically, or was it just like,
well,
I'm going to Alabama?
no, not at all. I thought that would be like the last place I would end up, really.
I imagine. Yeah.
my my son was born when I was 15, and his mom's family was from Weogufga in Coosa County, outside of Sylacauga, which makes
Okay.
Sylacauga look like the big city. And that's where I moved when we first came here, when I was like a 15-year-old, like crazy punk rocker, like
All
way out
right.
in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, so Alabama has all of those crazy town names that I can never get right, and
I
there's
probably
so
said it
many of
wrong.
them. I think that was close. I think there's a lot of Native American town
Yep.
names and stuff, and that definitely sounds like one.
No Native Americans in anywhere you look, but everything's named after.
That's right. That's right. So actually, I guess we'll kind of get into that a little bit. So your son was born when you were 15. Obviously, still basically a kid yourself at that age. So I imagine that was a big change for you. Obviously, kind of forced you to grow up. But had you already been doing art at that point, or when did that art start, and
Yeah,
how did that being a parent affect that? I guess would be my next question.
I always did a lot of art, but I think when I got into comic books when I was about 9 is when I really like started drawing all the time. And I probably did that for 5 years or so. And then when my son was born, I started working and stopped messing with comic books, and less drawing, more reading and stuff. And I didn't really do anything for a good 10 years or so, besides just little doodles here and there. Every once in a while, I'd do something with markers.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when the first, yeah, I'd say until my son was like 15 and my daughter was born, I didn't really do a whole lot with art. I just worked a lot, and every once in a while I'd pull out a stack of old drawings that I did between like teenage years and 20 or whatever and show somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, being a parent, that's a big responsibility there. And what it sounds like is you put that kind of passion stuff on the back burner, and went to work and were doing what you had to do to take care of the family, which
Yeah,
is
when my son was born, I went and I moved here. At first, I worked for an ice company in Arizona when I was 14, delivering ice all over the place. That's hard work in Arizona.
I
And then
bet. Yeah.
and then I moved here, and I got a job at Wendy's as soon as I turned 16. And a few months later, I got a job at Avondale, which isn't here anymore, but it was the textile company.
Okay.
And so I was making basically making pants and burgers for between 16 and 18. And
Gotcha.
then when I moved back out west, I learned to cook and got into restaurants and stuff.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I mean, that's
And
a so to me, cooking is kind of another different creative outlet. Is that something you still enjoy doing it to like today? Like you still like cooking and stuff, or
yeah, not to the like not I'm not overly creative with it anymore. It's
yeah,
just kind of something I can do. When my daughter was born, she was so particular and so picky that it like killed all my creativity in the kitchen because I was just making like whatever she liked. So
chicken
like
nuggets,
yeah,
the
before
use.
that I was like taking like at home French cooking classes and stuff and making all kinds of craziness. But I think when I started doing art full time, it kind of took away from all the other stuff I used to put my creativity into. Like I did like really bad music. I cooked. I did all kinds of different things until I
Yep,
figured out the thing that would stick.
gotcha. So I want to backtrack for a second. So I actually didn't know you were into comic books at all. I don't think we've ever talked about that before. So growing up being in the comic books, what were some of your favorites that really kind of inspires you at a young age from a artist perspective?
When I was real young, I found like all my mom had tons of comics. She was like a hoarder and there was just stuff everywhere. And then eventually I noticed there were comic books among all this stuff. And I picked up Avengers, like old 60s Avengers and stuff. Um, and then eventually I read a lot of different stuff. Like she liked DC a lot, which I grew out of, but a lot of like Legion of Superheroes and all that stuff with all the like multiple characters too. They'd have so many characters. Those were pretty interesting just because they'd have like ridiculous, like 30 characters in a
Mm-hmm.
group. Um, but eventually I got really into X-Men and the Marvel stuff, mostly like the mutant stuff. And when Jim Lee and Silvestri and all those guys started doing like that real crazy 90s, striking stuff, like I got real into that stuff.
Yeah.
And when they started Image, I was all into all that stuff.
Right on. So I actually, my dad was also a big comic book fan. That's how I got into it as well. And he had everything you were talking about there, those Legion of Superhero stuff. I mean, you look at the cover and there's like, it's just filled to the brim with characters, right?
Yeah, it was
And
so
it's so
interesting.
crazy. Yeah. So as a kid, that was, pretty influential to me. And he kind of was a bit of a hoarder of that stuff too. So there was comic books everywhere. And then as a kid, we watched all these like nerdy things together, all Star Wars and all that stuff. But I actually have this little Thor tattoo. It's
Oh
hard to
hell yeah.
see here, but yeah, Gloria drew that too. So that's in my dad's memory. That's something that kind of keep with me at all times. But yeah, comic books I think is a door for a lot of young artists. It's like the first thing that you see that kind of visually will catch you. I think that's very common to see. Like that's kind of where it starts. Now, obviously, if you look at your style now, I wouldn't necessarily have drawn that comparison. So you have a very unique style that really stands out from a lot of other artists. Your art looks kind of like nobody else's. So when do you think you really started to find that voice? Obviously, starting kind of comic book and now to where you are. How did you get to that? Obviously, it's kind of a punk rock influence, I think, in that a little bit. Was there like a street art thing, or when did you start kind of crafting more of what you feel is your style now?
I kind of, as soon as my kid was born, I quit buying comic books. So that I was done with comic books at like 14. So I was only really reading comics for like 5 years. And then when my son was born, I started just reading. Like we lived in a little tiny town. So I'd go to the library and get everything they had, like on a cult and like music and serial killer, anything that was weird that they had. I would just bring piles of it home. And around that time, I would just like doodle and stuff. And I can look back at all like the stuff I did and you can kind of see my style in there,
Yeah,
but it started, I think it started to evolve just doodling at work and stuff where I would just make all the lines connect, like weld the lines together, like make everything connect the way I thought it should.
yeah,
And then eventually I was like, oh, that's my style, is like a line doesn't just do this, it does that, and then it has like a weld to it and it like looks more organic. And I think that probably in my early 20s because I've got this tattoo on my shoulder of like this like guy with his head cut off and stuff that looks obviously like kind of like my style but just like real simple.
hmm
And I got that done when I was like 21 or something. So
okay, gotcha. So yeah,
I
I
guess
know what you mean. Go ahead.
and also a lot of my style developed out of being having a real hard time with being precise and neat and clean. Like I'm really bad at all of that. So trying to do like comic book art, I was not good at it because I would just like I need to finish something up and be able to just like splatter paint on it and it be look good so that make up for all the imperfections and the smudges and I think a
I,
lot of like my sketchy weird stuff developed out of there even though like now not everything I do has that aspect. That's where like a lot of it developed, especially like the hat you're wearing, like that girl, like just like lots of little dots and sketches, and like it's hard to fuck it up once you go in that route.
I gotcha. Yeah. So a lot of I feel, what is it? Oh, it's the old saying, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So you were like, I can't do this precise stuff, so like let me kind of mess around with this and kind of build my own thing.
Yeah,
I know I
drips and
can't do that.
shadows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do a little Jackson Pollock on there, just throw some paint all over it, and then there you go, it's art. But that's really cool, man. I love hearing that influence. So, and I love, your work to me, if I look at it, I mean, there's a lot of detail in it.
I should say
Uh,
also, with the comic book influence, I had a lot of Warren comics around me when I was a kid, like the stuff that Frazetta covers, and then like all kinds of South American artists inside, and all that
yeah,
realism and crazy black and gray,
yeah.
like that stuff, and then lowrider art magazines, like because I lived out west, so all that black and gray realism and stuff. Even though I don't do a lot of that, like all that stuff's like definitely in there from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
all the weird Aztec stuff and the women and the crazy muscular guys and all that stuff. Like I
Yep.
liked all that stuff just as much.
Yeah, man. Frazetta, I think is, when people think of that old school sci-fi art, he's kind of like
Yeah, I love
top of the
Frazetta.
mountain, right?
Boris,
And
Boris and Ken Kelly, all that stuff's rad.
yeah, I mean, so I grew up liking that stuff too, but my intro to that stuff was actually very different. I got into Rosetta later, through music actually, because he did so many album covers and stuff. That's kind of how I got to him. But my introduction to stuff was like super dorky. So like, uh, the game Warcraft. You've probably heard of World of Warcraft, but the original Warcraft was on PC. It's something I had when I was 10 years old, and it came with a book with all of this fantasy art inside of it. And I was like 9 or 10, and there's like elves and orcs and all this cool like sci-fi stuff. And I saw that and I was like, holy crap, like that was like just so badass to me. And granted, I'm not an artist at all, but I do think that from an early age kind of influenced that sci-fi love right there. And I've always appreciated that stuff, but never could make it come to life myself. But
Yeah,
and then
I knew I could never do a Frazetta quite like that. So I just, took the influence and did my own thing with it.
And that's what I think is great, man. Like I said, your style is so unique. Like if I see if one of your works, I'm like, I immediately know it. And I think that's as an artist, that's probably one of the most challenging things is to find the thing that defines you, where somebody
It's
can look
funny
at it.
when people first started telling me that, that I had a style, I thought they were like, no, I don't, because I do everything. I do so many different things. Like that thing on your hat's different
Mhm.
from, you know, a painting that I'm looking at in front of me that I did. Like I do a lot of different weird like things that completely different approach and everything, and somehow it still is a style that everybody recognizes, and I don't even understand it really. Like,
Yeah, that's the thing. It sounds organic at that point, right? It's not something you're necessarily like, all right, I got to do it this way because this is my style. It feels like it just is like, all right, I'm gonna sit here and do this and see what comes from it. So, now I know we talked a little bit before about your creative process, and you're like, man, I don't even know where to start with that because it's so different depending on the day. But I'm going to try to ask a little bit and hopefully you can explain when you're working on stuff. Do you sit down with an idea? Do you sit down from zero? And what's kind of your standard starting point? Is it digital? Do you start, pen and paper? I would just like to know kind of that process as much as you can describe it, even though I know it's not uniform all the time.
yeah, well, I do so much different stuff. Like if right now, if somebody asked me to do a painting of a specific thing, it would really depend on, like, if it was something I'm not comfortable with, I would probably start digitally so I could get it just right. If it was something that I'm not, totally, I can just, slap that down easily.
Mhm.
Because, having that extra ability to get digitally and make it just how you want it is like, you know, that's a level up for sure. But if
Yep.
somebody were just like to ask me to do a skull with like a flower bursting out of it, like I've done a gazillion times, I'd be like, hell yeah. And I
Yep.
just sit down and paint it and probably just, start with, I do a lot of paint markers now, a lot of acrylic paint markers. So either like I'll like start with a background or I'll just start with like a black line drawing with markers and then paint it from there. But um yeah, it's so different though. Right now I'm doing a lot of tattooing, which all that starts digitally usually.
Yep.
I'll do digital like flash or take something somebody wants and convert it to what they want. Um I do so much different stuff. I'll go outside and spray paint like 30 things is part, like that'll be the beginning of sometimes of a bunch of stuff. Or yeah, it's so different. It's really hard to, it just depends on what I'm
To
doing.
pin it down. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm
So.
I might make a sticker design, which is all done on my phone. Like I do a bunch of like little sticker graphics of just like clever, weird ideas I'll think up. And like I consider that just as important to me now as like doing a painting because I'm proud when I have like little something I'm like I wish I had bought this at a store. If I saw this in a store, I'd want to buy it.
Yeah.
So so yeah, it just really depends on what I'm making.
Gotcha. So you mentioned something there that I think is really important. It sounds to me like kind of your guiding North Star is it's something that if I want it, like if I saw this, I would want it. You think that drives most of your art is like that's the inspiration behind it. Like I want to create cool things that I think are cool, and then hopefully people will also like it. Is that kind of where it comes for you? Is like I would buy this if I saw it.
Yeah, partially, definitely. Like just having when I set up all my stuff, I want it to be stuff that if I walked up on, I'd be pissed off I didn't make. Like when I see like because I see some artists will have like it's rare for me because I do have like a specific taste, but I'll see sometimes somebody makes something I'm like, fuck, why didn't I make that first? Like I hate that you made that. Like and I usually buy it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the great thing about art is you'll catch those inspirations and you'll see those ideas and it's a good healthy thing to be like, oh man, I wish I would have thought of that. But
Yeah.
you gotta appreciate it at the same time. It's like I appreciate the idea and the thought behind that. And when you find a piece, I think that's how it works for every person. You find something that speaks to you, right? Like that's ultimately the goal is to make things that people are gonna walk up on and be like, oh shit, like that's super cool or that speaks to me in a different way, or just hits something, resonates with that person on something. And I think it's cool to be able to do things that you like
I do
that
make
other
I,
people.
sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you.
No, 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 you're good. Go ahead.
I do make a lot of art though. I will say, like sometimes it comes out of me and I'm like, I would never hang this in my wall. But somebody immediately likes it and wants it. Like that, I
Yeah.
mean, half the stuff I make, I probably wouldn't personally be drawn to, but I know that that's what somebody's asking me of me, or that that's like what's wanted at the time. Like I wouldn't do something outside of my realm that I'm not
Mm,
happy with, but I will do art that I necessarily don't want to look at, but I can still be proud of it and happy with it. When I first started, it was more like everything has to be something I would want to do and hang in my house. And then I was going to art shows in around Birmingham and noticed I scared people because all my stuff was black and red and skulls and just fire and death. And people were
mm,
like, ah. And so I was like, all right, maybe I can do fire and death and skulls, but like put a pink and purple background occasionally, which may
yeah,
not be something I want to look at every day, but it's still really cool and it'll appeal to somebody else. And like, it's just a way to be more appealing to, a broader audience without
sure.
doing stuff I don't want to do.
Gotcha. Yeah. So keeping the integrity of, what's your core essentially, but then adding little things, adding those little pops here and there to make it have a broader appeal and not so scary, not just reds and blacks all the time. And
Yeah. My
uh,
friend
n-
Dave too. My friend Dave Hayes, you probably know Dave. He bought me the first year I was painting a big tube of expensive blue paint and was like, here, and just like threw a monkey wrench into my plan. I was like, bastard, now I gotta fucking paint blue.
and you still have that tube to this day. You haven't
Now I
finished it,
killed
have
that tube after a couple years. I used it up.
nice.
Blue.
So I want to get into a little bit now. So we talked a little bit about your influences, and you talked a little bit about some of like the being into murder and occult and stuff. And I feel like that's a whole other conversation we could probably get into. But
I'm way less into that stuff now. Like it's like not even that interesting at this point.
listen, so murder podcasts are the biggest thing in the world right now. I'm pretty sure murder podcasts and YouTube and all that
I
stuff.
listened to him
Like,
for about 2 months last year.
yeah,
Like, and I got real. I was like, this shit's too dark. I just got it. I was like, I don't want to listen to this every fucking day. Like,
is that so? That was younger you. This is now the older, wiser, brighter Ryan is what we're
yeah.
saying here. Gotcha. Okay. Well, man, I want to get into the show stuff. So you picked up art again after 10 years being off and started kind of getting back into that. So when did you really start doing these shows? I know I'm talking about specifically organizing shows like these punk rock art shows. When did that start?
Um, I started a group on Facebook called Punk Rock Art that's still there. You can go look at it. It's like got ridiculous amounts of people. So it's kind of
Mhm.
useless at this point because that's how Facebook works. But when we started, it was really cool. Like it had like 10,000 people and you could post a piece of art and sell it in like a minute. Like it was so cool because there was a lot of people on there that were making and interested in art. And my friend John from Dodge City Tattoo, he was like, let's do a show. Like let's do a live show. And I was like, oh, I haven't organized anything like that. I've been to I'd set up for about a year or so at shows. And he was working at a tattoo shop and he was like, yeah, we got plenty of room. Just come in here. And So I got my friends from Montgomery, Brett and Adam Powell from Bulletproof Marshmallows,
Yeah.
and they played an acoustic set. We didn't even have a punk band. We just had some acoustic reggae guys, and
Yeah.
got about 10 artists, and we set up in the tattoo shop, and we did the first one there. And
So when was that roughly? Like year?
oh, I'm really bad at this.
I know you mentioned that earlier.
2016, 15. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Gotcha.
I'm bad at this. I think it was like 6 years ago now, maybe
Okay.
7. Time gets away.
Yeah.
After that, though, I was like, all right, I want to do this, but I want to do it with punk bands because obviously, like, this should be like a show. And I hadn't seen that many local shows yet because I'd been living here, but my daughter was really young, so I wasn't going out a whole lot. But I had went with my friend Dave again, my friend Dave, and we went and saw 7 Seconds, and Random Conflict and Skeptic opened for 7 Seconds, and I was way more impressed with those two bands than I was 7 Seconds. So I had like their names stuck in my head. I think I bought like a pen of each band. And so when it was time to do my first show, I hit those guys up. I hit up this band called The Indecided that's not around anymore, and Economy Cartel is not around anymore, but all their members are they're around.
Yeah.
But I hit up all those bands and managed to get Buck Mulligan's, which was the precursor to Brennan's, to let me do it. And I didn't meet Danny yet because Danny was out of town that day. But I go in there and set it up, and everything goes well. There's a mosh pit, things get knocked over. Everybody's, it's a typical show. It's pretty good. But then that place closed down. And so I was like, all right, I don't know where I'll do this again. And then I think I did one at Black Market, and I think I did one at the Nick, and I think I did one somewhere else, maybe. I did one at Syndicate Lounge. And then Brennan's open. We started doing them there.
Gotcha. So Brennan's was kind of from there on. So how long did the one at Brennan's run? I know that was when I first kind of met you a few years ago.
I think we did shows there about a year, maybe a little more than a year.
Yeah, and then
The first like the first 6 months of doing shows there, it was really hard. Like that we weren't getting a lot of people out. And so we really had to grow that. Like the show I did at Syndicate Lounge was big because we had Days and Days play. The show at Black Market was pretty good. The Nick was a pretty good one, but the ones at Brennan's at first, I mean, we had like 10 people. Like it was really small at first,
yeah,
and so we had to like get people to know where it was and what it was, and then by the time COVID happened, we were filling it up pretty well.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. I was there for, parts of some of those. Obviously my kids were pretty young at that time too. So,
Yeah,
let's getting Glory out there to do her thing and then take the kids home. But we stayed for a couple because we had some friends play a couple of those shows too. And it was a cool place, obviously. And then we obviously know what happened there with COVID and all that rough stuff. And then, so now you've landed at True Story. So,
yeah. Well,
um,
when Brennan's was closing down, and I was going over there to see Danny and stuff. Craig from True Story was there buying a lot of the things from Danny. So Danny was like, "Hey, half our stuff's going over here, and he's great. So you should go talk to him about doing shows." And so it took a while for us to get it going over there, but now that we've been doing them there for a solid year, over a year now,
yeah.
like that's pretty much the only place I want to do anything currently.
Yeah, man, it's great. And I want to get back to a little bit about being a parent. So for you, running these shows, how important was the all ages aspect? Was that something that being a parent was like, hey, as a parent, I can bring my kid here, I can do this? Or was it more so like, hey, if we do all ages, we're just opening this up to anybody who wants to come and enjoy
It
some
was
music
all
and art?
selfish. It
Yeah,
was all selfish. Yeah, I just wanted to be able to bring my daughter.
there you go.
She was little, and I was like, if I'm gonna do, I think the only one that wasn't all ages was the Nick. I think that's the only one I did, and I didn't like it. Like I didn't
Yeah,
like having a not all ages show. It didn't have the same vibe. And so yeah, I did it so I could have my daughter there. My ex-wife would bring her, or she'd usually come with me or something, and then she would come get her and take her halfway through, so she wouldn't be out too late when she was little.
yeah,
But yeah, being able to have her there, and then I saw other people being able to bring their kids, the vendors and stuff, and now it's the last year, you've seen what's happened. We've got like it's crazy. We have such a good all ages crowd, like kids from 4 years old, and up, just running around.
yeah, for sure. And I think it's so fortunate that you were partnered with True Story. I mean, it's run by two parents, right? They have little kids of their own, so
Yeah, we
they
get there to set up, and their kids are playing everywhere, and we're taking toys off the stage, and it's cool. We're all used to it.
yeah, which is great, man. I think that's been so awesome. And, for that crowd, I think you couldn't ask for a better group of people to come into these shows. And, we have all these bands and granted, there's still no filter on a lot of these bands when they get up there. They're still
Yeah.
doing their thing. It's not, to be clear to anybody listening, this is not kiddie shows. This is still full on punk rock art shows.
If you see Wesley get up there, take your kids to the patio.
Yeah, you
Don't be
might want to do that. Yeah.
like it's all
Great.
ages, but it's up to your discretion to see how much you want to corrupt your child.
Exactly, exactly. And Wes is great, obviously, and the band is great, but
But
that
for the
show
most
is
part, it is.
intense.
Yeah, for the most part, though, most of them are pretty appropriate for everyone.
Yeah, I think so. And obviously, like you said, you can make those decisions. There's a patio out back for a reason. But I mean, it's great. I think that youth is so important. The energy is so much different when you have younger people there. It feels like,
Oh, yeah.
it literally just get everything going, and
15 and
especially
16-year-olds in the mosh pit, or like 50-year-olds in the mosh pit, 40-year-olds in the mosh pit are great. I'm glad to see, grown people still having fun.
yeah.
But there's something about seeing like a 16-year-old just like going crazy. That's what it's about, really.
Yeah, for sure. So I know obviously you were a parent at 15 and 16 and stuff, but were you going to shows as a kid? Was that something that was a part of your youth at all? Were you into like punk rock and stuff at that time?
I got into punk rock when I was 14. It replaced gangster rap for me because it was
Oh,
basically the
nice.
same thing but smarter, I thought.
Yeah.
um, I went to one show. I saw NoFX, Bracket, Snuff, and Doss Clown in Phoenix when I was 14. Then my kid was born, and I didn't see another show until I was like 18. I didn't
Gotcha.
see anything. No live music. I just worked. So when I was 18, I went to like a couple bigger shows here in Alabama with like some of my friends that dragged me to like rock and metal shows.
Mm,
And but I didn't see any more punk rock until I went back to Arizona. And I think I saw NoFX again when I was like 18 or 19. And
gotcha.
then yeah, we lived really far from Phoenix where all the shows would happen. So it was like an hour and a half drive or whatever. So I didn't see a whole lot there, a handful of shows over the years. And then, even when I lived in Sylacauga here, I didn't know before the internet, I didn't know what the hell was happening in Birmingham. I wasn't close to the scene here and all the things that were happening back in the day. So I'd go to Atlanta and see bigger shows. But as far as like being involved in like a local scene, it's pretty much I was never close enough to anything that was happening until I moved to Birmingham about 15 years ago, 10 years
Gotcha.
ago.
Nice, man. So that, I think there's so much we could talk about there. You mentioned earlier how you went to that local show and the kind of bigger opening act or the bigger mainstream act didn't really catch your attention like Skeptic and like Random Conflict, which if anybody has lives in Alabama, you've probably seen those bands at some point in your life. They've been around the time. They're basically institutions in
Yeah.
punk rock in Alabama. And I think that's so important too, that your shows helped me fall in love with that too, if I'm being honest for a second. Coming to these shows, seeing these bands, seeing this energy, the passion behind it really reinvigorated me and made me feel more driven to do stuff too. And
People who make
um,
music just because they want to make music and not because they got to fill up the tour bus and keep going are just
yeah,
way more interesting to watch for me.
absolutely. Yeah, because I mean, listen, there's so many great bands, and I could list a bajillion of them right now, right, that go out and do the thing. But there's been a community that's really been built out of this where we're seeing these familiar faces coming in, these bands, they'll come in and hang out, they'll support the other bands, artists supporting other artists and stuff. You've really fostered a great community around here that is very, I don't want to say is insular is not the right word, but we, looks out for each other, supports each other. There's no competition. It's like, hey, if you're doing well, I'm doing well, that sort of thing. So I think that's really cool, man, and definitely something to be commended because it's not like that everywhere. I've lived in several different cities and several different states, and the scene is different everywhere. Right now, what's happening here, I think you're a huge part of what's driven, for the past year or so. It's really driven all these people after COVID to get together and build community again and come together and celebrate, and, through punk rock and have a rough week, get out there, be cathartic in the pit, and push each other down, but pick each other right back up. Right? I think that's so cool, man. So you should be really proud of that. Just want to throw that out there. I know you probably don't hear a whole lot of that, but yeah, dude, it's super, super, super cool. So, um, well, we're getting a little low on time, so I'll dive into a few other things I want to go over here with you. So, I want to get into some of the kind of the deeper things real quick. All right, so 16-year-old Brian, what would you think of this Brian and what he's done?
Oh, he'd be good with this.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, everything I'm doing now is what I would want to do at 16, but didn't have the tools or the pathway to do it. Like I was just kind of stuck going to work and not having any clear pathway to doing the things I wanted. Like
Gotcha.
it seemed like pretty much everything I'm doing now, I didn't think I would be able to do. So yeah, I'd be pretty
That's a
impressed.
that's a great feeling, right? To look back and go, remember that mindset at that time. It's like, man, I don't see how I'll ever do this. And now you're on the other side of it, and it's like, holy crap. Like,
Yeah. When I see people too that seem like, they don't have any, they can't figure it out. I try to just tell them, just wait. You might figure it out.
yeah,
You
for
might be
sure.
30 to 40, but
Yeah. And that's what's so great about the community around here is there is that support. There is that mentorship that I think is available there, people that have been through it. Um, so so this is a tricky one because when we originally set this up, it was about a month and a half ago before your newest venture had come out. But my question was, what's next? So obviously tattooing is kind of what's next for you, it seems like. But is there other things that you're kind of in the hopper that you're working on?
that's pretty much what I'm tunnel vision on right now. I'm still doing other kinds of art, but mostly I'm just wanting to fill up my calendar with tattoos so I can get really, really good at it. Like I want to get like 10,000 hours in so I can have that ability in front of me and be like, there it is. I have it right now. Like I'm happy with what I'm doing, but just want to, I just want to keep it going as steadily as possible to get to that
For
point.
sure. For sure. So obviously having tattoos and stuff, do you think that was a pretty natural transition for you? Is like, all right, I do art, I draw these things. You probably heard you should do tattoos for the past 15 years, right? So
Well, it's,
was that
yeah, I always wanted to do tattoos before I did art professionally. That was something I wanted to do, but I had tried it not unsuccessfully when I was really young.
mm,
I've got stick and pokes on my hands, but I one of the most like one of the questions I got asked most doing shows or art shows everywhere I go, anywhere my art is, people are like, do you do tattoos? And I always like, no, no, no. And I'd see people getting tattooed with my stuff, and sometimes it would be good, and sometimes it'd be
yeah,
And everybody I know that tattoos, whenever I would mention me learning to tattoo, would just kind of, nah. Basically, like if you're not gonna come be a shop bitch and devote your whole life to cleaning up after me for a year, I'm not gonna teach you anything, which is fine. That's the way they teach people, whatever,
yeah.
teach their own. But when I met somebody that would just teach me the skills I need to apply what I already know, like it just fit really well. And I'm learning from Brandy Lee, and she's like a good friend. She's somebody I can be around, and we our energy goes well together. And she's just teaching me the skills I need to do what I want to do without the excess
The
and
hazing, without the
yeah,
hazing.
without the hazing, which some
Maybe
people
maybe a little bit, maybe some poking and prodding here and there, but
yeah,
not
but
to the level you mentioned.
yeah, and and she's taught me a lot in a little bit of time. And I forgot where I was going with this. Oh,
That's all good,
I'm
man.
really enjoying it though. I always wanted to do it, and so now that I'm doing it, it's really I'm really enjoying it. I love doing it, and
Gotcha. So,
I want to do it more than I am. I just don't have enough time in the day.
listen, I like I said, I saw your calendar the other day. I don't know how you juggle it all, man. It's pretty insane stuff. So I was gonna ask a question. What would you offer? What advice would you give to young artists? A theme that I've seen from you so far is patience is a big thing. You're talking about wanting to do tattooing forever, wanting to do art, but it took you years to get there. But I'm curious if you were to give a younger artist some specific advice that you think would be helpful. What would you tell them?
Patience is a big one, yeah, because I've always been the type of person to try to do something before I know what I'm doing and fuck up a lot, like a lot. Like, whereas I have friends who I know that are very like they study everything really well and they get ready and prepare and they do things well. So watching them succeed has definitely slowed me down a little. Like not announcing that I was learning to tattoo for, 5 months or whatever it was that I was learning before I announced it. That was a definite test and patience for me. So
Yeah.
having patience is good. Another big one that I think if you want to sell your art, you should go get a job selling something that you don't give a shit about for someone else and get really good at it. Because no, I shouldn't say nobody. A lot of artists that I meet aren't very good at selling their art, but they're good at making art.
Mhm.
And if you can sell some bullshit that you don't care about to people that you don't like, you'll be able to sell something you love to people you like. And I think that like a lot of people do, they skip that part Like you need to go work a shitty job selling some crap to people so that you can be better at selling something good to people. And
That's
then you won't be a bullshitter either, because you don't need to be a salesperson where you, because I don't like that either, like making people feel uncomfortable with like a shtick or something.
yeah.
But just being able to like, here's what I've got and not be embarrassed about it. And like a lot of artists they don't feel comfortable like holding up what they've done. But I
Yeah.
like it because then they look at that, not me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly a vulnerability to any sort of creative venture. You're putting yourself out there a little bit and hoping people will like it. But I do love that advice of sell something you don't love first. It's two different skills, creating art versus selling
Yeah.
is definitely a different thing. And I think at the end of the day, it's about if you can have conversation with people, that's really key. If you can talk and just naturally, that's really, really great. So running down to about a minute left here. So we've got a couple more to finish up here. So last one I want to ask, or before getting into your events coming up, what are you listening to right now? What's something you've been listening to a lot of?
Ricky Ramblin' Tate. I've been listening to him
Yeah,
a lot. Like I can't. Every time I go sit at the oddity shop, Birmingham Oddities. Everybody should go check out Birmingham Oddities. Me and my wife help manage the place and keep it stocked full of weird stuff. Um, every time I go in there, I play some Ricky. I'm listening to a band called The Fuss. It's a ska band. They sound kind of like old Jamaican ska, but it's modern. It's not goofy. I've been listening to a lot of that.
nice. Yeah, Ricky's the best, man. Ricky is
Yeah.
in a million bands and creates solo music that's super awesome. I know Drifting is one of your favorites. I've seen you share that one a couple times for
Oh
sure.
yeah.
If I just choose, I think The Witch is one of my favorites. I
I
love that
love
one a
that
lot.
song.
I am the devil.
I was making a live video in the oddity shop, and as right as I come around, there's a witch statue, and the witch started on the radio 2 days ago. It was crazy.
Meant
Shit
to
like
be.
that be happening.
Meant to be. Yeah, Ricky's best, man. Okay, last one. Tell me about your events coming up that you want to plug.
February we've got punk night, metal night. We have a punk rock Valentine's Day prom, and we have a punk rock art show, and they're all full of fucking awesome bands that I don't have in front of me, but just they're all good.
All right, and that wraps the first episode of the Iron City Sludge podcast. We ran out of time there at the end, but I will drop all the links for Brian and his social media so you can go and follow those. Check out all those shows he's got coming up next month. Also in March, March 8th has John Christ, the original guitar players from Danzig, coming, which is going to be super cool. So definitely want to check that out as well. Once again, thank you, Brian, for joining me today and having a chat. I will have more of these coming up soon. I'm going to drop some links for my social, for Facebook and Instagram there for you. I'm super excited to continue these conversations every week with different artists and different bands in the Southeast that kind of represent that underground scene. So thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.